Beginning in Summit, as you create your sale escrow, you'll be brought to the actual opening tab. And on this opening tab, we want to make sure that we enter the total consideration. And you'll notice there is an include 1099 box here that is checked. It is checked by default for every sale escrow. If none of the sellers in your escrow require a filing, then you can just uncheck that box and you're done with your requirements for filing. And that's all you'll have to do. Now, assuming that there is at least one seller in the escrow that requires a 1099-S filing, we will go to the Principals tab and then to the Sellers tab. And you will enter all of your sellers just as you normally would in a normal escrow, using Next for each seller and entering their information. And we want to make sure that the Social Security number is always there. And we want to make sure that the Social Security number or tax ID number that you use in the filing matches up with the name that you're showing in the filing. That has to match up according to the IRS records. If it doesn't, then you'll be penalized for that. So after we enter the name, the social, we want to make sure that we enter the forwarding address for that seller. Now, if you have a seller that is out of the country, you can go ahead and check the foreign country box, and it will show right here, enter the city, state of Providence, and country in the city field, but you want to leave the state field blank. So you can use we call address 1, we call it address 2, you can use the city. Leave the state and the zip code fields blank for a foreign country address. That way the format stays correct with the IRS regulations. And then also, very important, we want to make sure that each seller gets their allocated proceeds entered down here in the bottom right. Now there's a kind of a main key that we kind of follow. For a husband and a wife that file jointly together, they only require one filing. And to set that up properly, the way we do it is we'll enter the husband as seller 1. His allocations will be 100%. We'll enter the wife as seller 2, and her allocations will be 0%. So that way there's only one filing for the couple. That's kind of the main rule for this screen. After you enter your sellers and all their pertinent information, then we're going to go over to the 1099 tab. And the 1099 tab is the actual filing. Everything on the 1099 tab is what's used to pull in, to create the filing, transmit it back to FPS, and then we transmit it to the IRS. So we want to make sure that everything on this 1099 tab is correct. Now, I want to go through each of the columns so you understand what they are and what they mean and how we can work with them. So obviously we have the sellers column. You'll see your seller 1 and seller 2 that you enter from your seller screen, and that just shows the name that you entered. The seller line 2 is a manual entry line that if you want to maybe add a spouse's name or maybe a title or something like that, you have the option to do that. You don't have to. It's like a manual entry. You just double click in the box and then you can add whatever you'd like. And the allocated proceeds is going to come from your opening tab, the total consideration, and it's going to use your allocations that you entered on your sellers, and it'll do the math for you, and that gives you the total there of each seller. And the reason why we have $250 for the husband here for seller 1 is 100% allocations. The wife was set at 0 allocations, so that's why hers says 0. And then the prorated tax credits, those are going to come from your prorations tab, do the math for you, and enter the figures here. The print 1099 column basically is yes and no. Is there a filing? Yes. Do you want a filing? No. Is there a filing for that seller or not? Obviously, we want one for the husband. He's showing 100% of the allocations. The wife does not have a filing, and that's why hers says no. Property and services is going to be for your exchanges. If you have an exchange, then you can change that to yes. And to do that, you just click on the right side of the box and you can click yes and no here. And it will change your entry. The state is the state of the property that the property is in. Change date is not, it's just for FPS's information. We use that whenever there's a change made to the filing. And finally the Social Security number and tax ID number. The main thing on this tab is to make sure it's all verified, it's correct, so that the filing is created properly. And that is pretty much how we do that. Now, if you have any changes made to a filing, maybe down the road, something changed, sales price or something, you need to make sure, it's very important that you make sure that all the corrections are made on the 1099 tab and that you're verifying that the information is correct. Okay, it does not pull it over automatically. We do that on purpose so that you have full manual entry of the filing and create it any way you want. So it's real important that you make sure those corrections are done on this tab before the close of escrow. Now, after all the information is in Summit and you're closing your escrow, you need to decide how you set up your processing with FPS. Are you going to give your filings to the seller at close, or are you going to have FPS print the filings in January and hand them off to you and you forward them to your sellers? However you chose your processing is when you'll go ahead and make the decision if you're going to print or not. And after everything's been entered, you're ready to close, you can go to your documents, and you can choose your 1099-S filing and print it and either hand it off to your seller. Of course, we want to make sure there's a copy in the file for that. And that is how that works. Now, when FPS pulls back the filings, it creates a missing information report if any filings are missing information. Maybe you forgot a forwarding address, or maybe a Social Security number is missing. Is what FPS does when we run it in Summit on our side is we create this missing information report. It's emailed automatically to the managers, and it shows a list of all of the escrows that are missing information, what exactly is missing, and all they have to do is go into Summit, go into this 1099 tab, make sure everything is there what the report is asking for, or the address. Of course, you'll go back to the Sellers tab here and make sure everything's been entered, verified on the 1099 tab, and then next time we run our electronic batch program through Summit, it will pick up the filing and come off your report. And that's how we everybody kind of stays on the same page, and you're always updated as to where you stand with your filings. So very, very, very nice feature. I think that is all we have for today, and thank you for joining us.